Good morning and welcome to Valley Fever Survivor.
Hi.
This is Sharon Garrett, and we are very happy that she has decided to do an interview with us for our Valley Fever Voices series. I would like to ask Sharon to start with telling us how and when she got her Valley Fever and proceed from there as to everything that went on from that point.
Okay. Well, I've had valley fever for 10 years now, but I've only known about it for 7, which means that on October 7th, I remember the date because that's the day that Californians voted in Arnold Schwarzenegger as governor. And I was on call as a CPS social worker and was called to Stockton, California to pick up a runaway client. And I didn't get to vote. So that's why that date stuck in my mind. When I went to Stockton, I picked her up at a new juvenile detention facility, and there was a lot of construction going on and clouds of dust. And I had never heard of valley fever, never heard of any part of none of the names, San Joaquin valley fever, desert rheumatism, never heard of any of that stuff. So that was October 7th. By Halloween, I was aching from head to toe, running a fever, couldn't understand what was wrong with me because whenever I've gotten strep throat or anything else contagious from my clients, it usually hits me and knocks me down. But this was a very kind of a slow onset. And like I said, by Halloween, I couldn't understand where all my energy went. By Thanksgiving, I was flat on my back in my bed. By Christmas, I took my daughter to the mall for Christmas, and I couldn't walk even half the length of the mall. So in January then of 2000, let's see, that was 2003. In January of 2004, I was diagnosed with severe pneumonia through a standard chest x-ray. So, so the doctors, of course, they started throwing antibiotics at me and inhalers. And it just so happened that I had to change physicians because my insurance changed. So there was a whole bunch of gnarly stuff going on right around the time I got sick. And none of my doctors could figure out what was wrong with me. I was unable to drive, unable to get off of my couch. In fact, it was so bad that I had to lay on my right side for 2 or 3 months. If I tried to sleep or turn over onto my left side, I would start to drown in all the fluid that was in my lung. A doctor finally told me that every lobe in my left lung was involved with this pneumonia, and there was only one little spot in my right lung. So for 3 years following this onset of it, I did not know what was wrong with me. I went to because I have diabetes, type 2 diabetes, I went to my primary care physician every month. He couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. He thought at one time I had gout and was sticking needles in my knees to see if there was any fluid. And I went through hell with all of the different diagnostic tests and I think we'll try this from the doctors. And then finally, I had a CT scan, and because they continued to see bad things on my x-ray. So the CT scan came back as metastasized lung cancer, and that it was in advanced stages and that I had less than 9 months to live.
Not a good feeling.
No, and I had a 16-year-old daughter at home, and so all of a sudden we're thrown, well, it was interesting at the doctor's office because I didn't even see my doctor that day. he let his physician's assistant come and tell me that that I had advanced lung cancer with a death scenario, you know. And she danced all around the subject, and telling me to put my affairs in order, make arrangements. And I had to corner her and ask her, are we talking about cancer? And she said, yes. And I said, are we talking about metastasized cancer? And she said, yes. And I said, well, what kind of cancer is it? And she said, we think that it's small cell lymphoma. Well, I had a friend who had recently died of that, and I know that it's an ugly death, and it's a guaranteed death. If you're told that you have advanced in the final stages of small cell lymphoma, you do need to get your Bible out and, you know, write some things in it for your offspring, because your time is short. So for 3 months, my 16-year-old daughter and I thought that I was going to die any day. And the first infectious disease doctor I was sent to didn't even make eye contact with me at all during my appointment. And I had one of my very good friends, Sandy, with me, and she's a registered nurse, because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to absorb everything that would be talked about, and she would be able to interpret for me. So this doctor made ugly faces about there weren't enough handouts in the exam room, and he went out of the room storming at his staff and peeked back in the room and said, well, make an appointment for next month. And this is already 3 months into a 9-month death sentence. And my friend said, well, doctor, doesn't that seem a bit liberal with the time? If she's only got a few months to live, don't you want to see her before next month? And he said, oh yeah, whatever you want, and walked away.
Jeez.
And she said, I don't think you should see him again. So he was part of a big practice that has an exclusive contract with Health Physician. And I won't mention any names, but so I switched doctors and in a whole different location from where that doctor was. And I got a doctor, and he's a really wonderful man, but he doesn't know anything about valley fever. He's not even native to this country, much less know about a native fungus in the soil. And so he was treating me by proxy. I don't know what the doctors call it, but that's what I call it. And it wasn't even by phone, it was by letter. He was very vague throughout all my appointments, and never gave me any information. The one time I cornered him and insisted that he talk to me about titers, he told me that I wouldn't understand the whole concept of titers anyway.
I think that's a code word for saying he doesn't understand titers.
Well, and then his follow-up to that, his follow-up answer pretty much proved it. He said, I think this last time, as he slammed my file closed, it was 1 to 12 or something like that. And there's no 12. We all know there's no 12. And I just kind of chuckled inside and thought, you know, I'm beating a dead horse. Why bother? Because one thing I have learned from valley fever is to budget my energy, you know, and not spend it fighting a war that nobody else is participating in. So, but I stuck with him for several years. Now, I turned 50 4 months before I contracted valley fever, and I just turned 60 this last summer. I lost my entire 50s to to valley fever. And because I spent 3 or 4 years in bedridden. It took 2 years for my doctor to finally admit that I had a severe disseminated case of cocci. It took 2 years for me to get him to say that.
Was
And
it the same doctor?
The same doctor. He didn't say the words. I asked him, and he said, "Oh yeah," and walked away. I realized that it was a waste of my time, my money, my gas in my car, to go to an appointment where I was learning more about his family. I learned that his son was also an infectious disease doctor in Reno, and that he was trying to talk him in. I learned way too much about his family and not enough about valley fever. So I canceled my next couple of appointments. Then I went back and saw another doctor. Well, I confronted the office manager at this huge practice. They must have 25 doctors in this practice. And I said, I want one who knows the most of all of your doctors about coccidioidomycosis. I want the doctor who can spell it.
It is a challenge.
It is a challenge. And I want them to be able to tell me what a good titer is and what a bad titer is. And if they can do that, I will let them treat me. So they came up with a very sweet, gentle doctor. But he knew a little bit. He knew more than anybody else there, but it still wasn't really enough. And the one and only time I saw him after a blood test, he said, well, your test was negative. You're cured. You don't need to come back ever unless you feel like you have symptoms, like you've caught it again, or unless you feel like it's come back. That's what he said. And so I haven't. And that was, when I used the word remission, he said, you don't have cancer. And I said, I understand that. When I used the word chemo, because I was on the fluconazole for almost 6 years, and nobody telling me my titers, I just told them, okay, I'm going to stop until you can, because the medication was really making me sick. And physician's assistant told me that I had a negative or a 0 titer. And I said, okay, as of today, I'm taking myself off this medication, and I take full responsibility for that. So I haven't been back, but Dr. Thompson from UC Davis invited me to come and join their clinic at UC Davis Med Center, and my insurance has approved that outside of the Blue Shield network. So I'm excited about that. Maybe I'll finally find out what's going on. If I have disseminated valley fever, then why are they only x-raying my chest? Why are they only CTing my chest? It's all over my body. Why are they, So I have a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. There are 3 doctors there at the infectious disease clinic that I'm anxious to meet. So I, after 4 years of being bedridden, 5 to 6 years on fluconazole, losing 3 really good jobs as a social worker throughout this time, because of course my performance suffered, and when a job says it's full-time and it's social work, it means 50 and 60 hours a week, and on call 24/7. So now I find myself in a position where my big fight now is to pay for my medication and to just keep a roof over my head, because I can't work anymore. But that's where I am now. I'm feeling better, but I want that documented.
During which time was it when you read Valley Fever Epidemic?
That was before I took myself off of the fluconazole. Valley fever epidemic changed the whole ballgame for me. I felt like until I read the book, I felt like I was the only person in the world with it. I thought that a lot of the things that I did that caused me enormous pain was because I was fat. Because I swelled up to almost 300 pounds while I was on the fluconazole. Oh, and then I would dip way down to 200 and then zoom back up again. And I experienced congestive heart failure during that time too, due to a diabetic medication. So I was carrying around 50 pounds of water. There were a lot of things going on. I had knee surgery during the 3 years of misdiagnosis. I had arthroscopic knee surgery because I had torn both menisci. Is that the right meniscus?
Yeah, I guess meniscus is one, so menisci makes sense.
Or meniscuses. In each knee. So I had each knee done 3 months apart, and he said that there was some kind of something floating in the fluid. And now I look back, because we didn't know anything about valley fever at that time, I look back and I'm thinking, that could have been a little cyst or a little node from the cocci that was in my knee.
It would have been wonderful to be able to get a diagnosis from that, because that could have helped out perhaps in treatment and diagnosis too, just to be able to see it there.
Right. I didn't have any idea about it. And again, my orthopedic surgeon was from a foreign country. Wonderful man, great at his job, a true artistic doctor. But the differential diagnosis that he got, and that's the, as you may know, that's when a doctor says, I think this is what it is, and it might also be this and be that. We need to rule those out. But we can't say it's not that. And the differential he got was kidney failure. And he thought that I was being treated for kidney failure. So there's a whole bunch of snafus going on through this whole thing. Not to mention pharmacists refusing to fill prescriptions for 800 milligrams of fluconazole a day because they felt that it was uncalled for, that was an unusually and potentially fatal dose. So it's, I mean, I was fighting a war, and cocci was not the only enemy.
Yeah, that's really tough. When you started out, you said that you had never heard about valley fever or any of the other names that it went by. But are you a native to California?
Yes, I am, born in Albany, a native to the Bay Area.
So being a native to California, you had never even heard about this. And it's been in California since the beginning of time, so to speak.
No, but when Dr. Hyatt, when I first met with him, he put up, it was an interesting office visit. He put up the two, at this point, we're going with the tentative diagnosis of advanced lung cancer. And he put up two x-rays on the light board that were identical, but they were taken 3 years apart. And he said if it was cancer, you would not have lived long enough to have the second x-ray taken, because this is invasive, it's just too much. And so we started talking about it, and he said, I said, well, what do you think it is then? He says, I think it's a fungus. And so, of course, he didn't say one specifically, so of course I went home and spent my sleepless nights Googling lung fungus, all these things. And then I read this one, and when it said also known as valley fever, something rang familiar about that, even though I don't remember ever hearing anything about it, ever. But our brain stores things we don't know about. so, so I, so when I went back to him, I said, is this the one they call valley fever? And he said, oh yes, oh yes. And we went from there. But I was so relieved that he said, you're not going to, he said, whatever it is, it's not cancer and you're not going to die in 9 months. And I said, okay, phew, I'll take that till you can name it. So I was very happy with that.
How do you find it to communicate with others about valley fever? How other people know about valley fever or more often don't know?
I ask almost every human being I come in contact with, even cashiers at the grocery store. If they say, well, go home and have a nice day, or I'll make a mistake or count my money wrong and I'll say, I'm not feeling very well. And they kind of step back and I say, it's not contagious. Have you ever heard of valley fever? And so I have like a 5-sentence spiel that I go through with them. It's a lung fungus that you catch from dust and dirt. And it's also known as San Joaquin Valley fever. And it's in Southern California from San Joaquin down and through, and I just give them a 10-second cram on this disease. So at least they've heard of it.
Yeah.
At least then when they hear something, they go, oh, a woman just mentioned that to me in the grocery store. I mention it to lab techs. I mention it to x-ray techs. I mention it to mailman, everybody. And I'm doing my part to spread the word because people need to know about this disease. We need a vaccine so that the fear will be removed from the whole equation and people can safely live and travel to the endemic areas. That's what we need. We need a cure, but we need a vaccine. It's better to not get it than to have it and have to be cured. So that's my bias anyway.
Do you think that the state is doing enough to alert people about this disease?
No, I don't think any of the states are. In fact, one of my Facebook friends who lives in Arizona messaged me and said, you'll never believe what I saw today. I saw a billboard that mentioned valley fever. And she says, I've lived here for 35 years, most of her life, and I've never heard anybody talk about it except for little blurbs on the news. And to me, that's amazing. There are star athletes who have gone to this area to train, to play, to perform, who have contracted this disease, and it as it does with normal everyday non-star people, it takes everything from you. It takes your livelihood, it takes your vocations, it takes your career, it takes your finances, your home, your nest egg, everything. And not to mention the people who stop visiting because they don't want to disturb you. They don't want to inconvenience you, but they certainly don't want to catch it. And, and they'd rather go hang out with their healthy friends than to hear about valley fever. So it takes everything. You can find yourself alone with nothing, no matter how hard you worked. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. It steals your identity. It tries to take away the person you were, because you still are that same person. You're not any different. but it steals as far in other people's eyes, they see you completely differently.
Absolutely.
And it's not fair because people should know that one, it is not contagious from person to person. You get it by inhaling the spores into your lungs. It could activate right away or not. So a person could have in the body 10 years or more before it even does activate.
That's what I am addressing with. I have a twin sister. We're fraternal twins. And I mean, we even have total different blood types, and even our RH factors. She's negative and I'm positive, which that should have killed my mother back in the 50s. But she, in January, she contracted pneumonia, and she still has it, and it's April. And she's been through all of the new antibiotics and all of the old antibiotics, and she just had another chest x-ray last week, and I want her doctor to, she is on Medicare, so I'm not sure what she's going to be able to access as far as services go, but I want her to, I want them to rule out valley fever without a doubt, and not just come back with a negative titer. Okay, let's just go and do another complement fixation test for the titer. You know, I know, as well as anybody who has read anything about the diagnostic process for valley fever, that the blood test they give us only measures the antibodies in our body. So if we don't have a very good immune system, we're going to come back with a no-show for the antibodies on this test, and we could have raging valley fever. It could be raging through our bodies, eating all of our internal organs as it's doing to me, and still have a no-show for the antibodies. And so I want him to refer her to someone who can do a bronchoscopy. Doesn't have to be open lung. It can be a bronchoscopy like they did on me. They put me to sleep, and went in and got a sample. My doctor says I hit him a couple of times. I felt good about that. Oops, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? But no, he said I fought him.
Actually, I wasn't put asleep when I had my bronchoscopy.
Wow.
Yeah, they just numbed the back of my throat. And for people that don't know, it's a tube that goes through your nose that goes down into, take a sample of the fluid in your lung. But nobody told me the dangers of that. And there actually is a major danger to doing bronchoscopy.
I'm glad I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know it either until later on. But you can take the fluid sample up, and if they lose even one drop and have it go into your other lung, you could actually infect your other lung, which was not infected to begin with. And I do believe that happened to me.
Oh.
So what I want to say is that before anybody gets tests, if they want to know or don't want to know, it's up to them. But if they do want to know, always find out about the pros and cons. Sometimes there are no options. You either do it or you don't do it, and sometimes you're better off doing it and taking your chances with all sorts of things, whether it's surgeries or medications and stuff. But there is a danger even to that, which I did not know at the time.
Well, I feel like my sister's case is following in my footsteps. And she hasn't been, she has not been, she's been agoraphobic for many years now. But when my mother was going through her dying process, she was down in the Mojave Desert. And my sister went down there to care for her. And she lived down there for months at a time. And I know that that could have been dormant, and just the right conditions activated it somehow. So that's the problem with my case. I can't prove that I got it while I was on the job, because the workers' comp investigator told me that if I have ever traveled south of Sacramento ever in my life, that then that would nullify my claim of catching it in Stockton.
It's very interesting that the workers' comp professionals can evaluate that if this has happened at any time in your life, there is a risk. Whereas most medical doctors will say, "Oh, you would have had it, and if you went to some place, and of course, since you didn't have it at that time, you would have been much better, and you'll never have to think about it, know from it, consider valley fever again in your life if you had been there."
Yeah.
Which is, it'd be interesting for the medical profession to catch up with the insurance profession.
Right, right. Well, and he said that he'd been doing this for 20 years, and as an investigator, he has specialized in valley fever cases. And I had an attorney tell me, a workers' comp attorney tell me that unless I worked outside in the fields, harvesting crops, and that I would never be able to succeed with a workers' comp claim.
So that shows you how little they really know about how easy it is to contract this disease.
Right. And they specialize. Can you see my air quotes? They specialize in valley fever. And so one of the things I want to go back to what you said about the dangers and the risks involved with the bronchoscopy. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. One of the things that I've noticed that this disease has done to me, it has exaggerated my previous anxiety issues. You know, my mother passed away in spring. I'm sorry, I stumbled a little bit. Actually, today is the 14th anniversary of her passing. So she passed in 2000, and that's when I started having anxiety issues. Is when we got her death sentence, her prognosis. And we all went down there. So you know, I did tours, musical tours in the 80s. Starting down in Palm Desert, Palm Springs, and working my way up through the valley. You know, I remember, there's just, my brain has gone through so many times and places that I could have caught this. I can't prove that I caught it in Stockton, but I know I did. I know I did. So
it's more likely that you had it where you were living, because this can travel up to 500 miles from the area where it's endemic and to infect either a person or animal. And a lot of people don't know that or don't want to believe that, but it's true. And it's more likely that if you were well up to that point, then it probably is a new infection rather than an old one that was dormant in your body.
I was so well that I was working 25 hours a week, attending college full-time, raising a young child, participating in my church 5 days a week, and walking 3 times a week up to 4 miles. And if I had an hour break at California State University, Sacramento, I would put my backpack on and I would walk the perimeter, which is several acres, of the whole university. And I would walk it 2 or 3 times. I was very, very, very healthy and very active when I got knocked down by this disease. I was very healthy.
Was there any construction going on nearby at the time just before you got ill?
Absolutely. They were buying, they were building all of the new San Joaquin County buildings that are now standing on that ground. There were bulldozers and, the big dirt movers, and there were clouds of dust. So much so that I was driving a county car that was white and it was clean. I went into the juvenile facility, and while we did all the paperwork, it maybe took 20 minutes to get her released. And I took her out to the car, and the car was covered in brownish red dirt. That's how much dirt, how much dust was flying around. It only took 20 minutes for it to get completely covered. And what's really weird is I had been reading a journal article about going into correction facilities like juvenile and jails and prisons, and that tuberculosis was running rampant in some of these places, and the risk to practitioners like myself contracting TB, that this was something that we had to be vigilant on. And I had been reading that. When I walked into the through the front doors of the facility, I swallowed really hard, and I thought, I just got something. And I thought, oh, Sharon, you're being paranoid. You're being a hypochondriac. But I have known before when I was infected with strep throat. I knew I had been infected that moment. So it's just weird. It's, not all the time, but that day I just had a feeling. But I was thinking along the lines of TB. I was thinking, oh, well, this is a brand new facility. She's the only client in here. They had just opened the facility. So it certainly wasn't going to be TB coming from there. So it was just a really weird experience. And they called it Stockton, but it's actually south of Stockton in a little, excuse me, catch my breath, in a little place called French Camp. And so the workers' comp people were really hostile with me when I said Stockton, but it's really in French Camp. And they said, well, make up your mind. Where were you? I find that with Valley Fever, I find a lot of hostility out there, even from people who don't know anything about it. There's a hostile environment.
Can you speculate on why you think they're being hostile?
Fear. That would be my first guess. Fear of the unknown, and if I can catch it, they can catch it. Most of the people I had at least 50 close friends in 2003. That I could call up day or night and say, I need you, and they would come. At least 50, from my church, from the environment I was living in, family, at least 50 people like that. I don't have anybody now. Even my daughter, who was 16 at the time, she joined the Army at 17 because our house was boring. Because I was in bed. I couldn't take her places. I couldn't participate in any of her activities. So she joined the Army, and that culminated with her marrying a guy in the Army and then him abandoning her in Florida. And there she is, and I haven't seen her in 3 or 4 years. So I think the hostility comes from they don't want to, people are already overwhelmed with their own lives and their own obstacles and their own challenges. They don't want a friend who has them either. Unless all they have to do is bring you a casserole, then they can deal with it. But I think that it's fear of the unknown and them being overwhelmed with their own lives. They can't deal with mine too. They just can't. it takes special people to do that. So,
Well, I always believe that if somebody's really your friend, the only way to know how good a friend they are is if they're there when you need them. And if they're
right.
not there for you when you need them the most, then they were always a superficial friend. I'll do your quotes, a superficial friend.
Superficial. Well, yeah, it's true. Both of my sisters have severe mental disabilities. And I don't know if that's politically correct, but I'm on a campaign against being politically correct. I'm on a campaign for direct communication, and if that takes saying things that makes people uncomfortable, then too bad. Life is not comfortable.
The discussion of valley fever tends not to be very comfortable for people.
It really isn't. When I spoke with the head researcher recently, he seemed unhappy with me. And it may be because of the things that I said on the documentary about knowing more. When you go in to see your doctor, you need to know more about valley fever than he or she does. Respect their medical education and their skills and their practice, but you have to know what you're talking about when you go in there. And I think that he took that as a put down. Because doctors, as we all know, have always had huge egos, and sometimes that's an asset. But I think that he took it as disrespect towards doctors. But I've earned the right to say what I want about doctors, and they taught me that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with so many of our questionnaires that have come in, the way people have responded, there are a lot of people who no longer have a great deal of respect for the medical profession, that they've just been mistreated for so long. Actually, as you have been mistreated, that years have passed and so many just do not get the care that they need. And they don't even get the human care, as in bedside manner, that's even remotely close to respect.
Respect. I don't want to hear about budget cuts or the economy or, our clinic just lost some of our best physicians. Respect doesn't cost anything that goes down on a profit and loss sheet. And when a doctor treats me like I'm an idiot, but I know more than he does, I take offense to that. I can't tell you how many doctors and how many pharmacists I have told, and physician's assistants, because I tend to be shoved off onto them, and they don't know anything. They don't even know where to look about valley fever, that is. I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation. I have a serious illness that very well may take my life. I need you to be part of my treatment team. And as part of my treatment team, I need you to pay attention to what medication you're putting in the bottle and giving to me. Because I had a doctor put, it wasn't Risperdal, it was another antipsychotic was in the bottle rather than the fluconazole. And if I wasn't hypervigilant about what every pill looks like, that could have done some serious damage. If you don't have psychotic issues and symptoms, and you take an antipsychotic medication, it can permanently change the chemicals in your brain. So, they offered me a $20 gift card to Rite Aid. I've gone through all of the pharmacists, Target, Rite Aid, Longs before they went defunct, CVS. Right now there's a CVS. I could throw a wadded up piece of paper and hit this CVS. That's how close it is to my house. But I have to drive 8 miles across town to get my narcotic painkillers filled.
Why is that?
Because they're afraid of keeping Oxy in the pharmacy that's right close to my house. They've been robbed. They've had psychos come in and attempt to rob them with fake guns. One of the pharmacists was held captive for an hour or two while the sheriff talked at and he had a wooden gun that he painted to look real. And he was psycho. I mean, he seriously was having a psychotic break due to withdrawals from OxyContin. And all he cared about was getting OxyContin. And so they're afraid of it. I could get it filled there, but I'd have to wait 10 days between the time I hand them the prescription and the time they can fill it. And then I'd be psychotic.
So it's not even easy getting the medications that you need. And your medications most of the time are all because of valley fever.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I have diabetes also. So some of my prescriptions are... Yeah, my doctors have never attributed it because I was diagnosed with it 2 years before I got valley fever. But I think one of the reasons it hasn't, well, it's a whole can of worms. I think that we could have resolved the diabetes. I think I got it because I was diagnosed with it right after I graduated from college, and I wasn't walking as much. My father in his 80s came to live with me. My life slowed down except for the 60 hours a week working, but the rest of my life slowed down, and suddenly I had high blood sugars. And I think that it was because I was putting on stress weight at my job, and I wasn't walking. I wasn't exercising as much. So nobody has ever connected the diabetes to the valley fever, but the CAT scans clearly show that my pancreas is atrophied and covered in nodes.
Oh, really?
So how could it be producing insulin then?
And incidentally, diabetes is a risk factor for increased valley fever severity, which doctors should have been on the ball to at least think if that's one of the possibilities there. That's hopefully what more educated doctors will be thinking for other valley fever cases too, to be considering that. But with lesions there, that's also something that definitely needs to have an eye on.
My liver is covered with them also, and of course they're all over. They're all over, but they haven't done a CT scan that got more than just my upper torso. And I'm hoping that at UC Davis Med Center, at least for a base measurement, they will do either a full body CT or a full body MRI. I want to know where they are. I want to know. I know where they are. I could take one of those drawings that we used in Child Protective Services to indicate where the child's injuries were, and I could mark out where they're going to find the nodes. And most of them are in places where I had previous injuries from years ago. It seems to me that the Coxy attacks those weak links.
The very strange thing that you just said that is that there was one paper from the 1970s that was used in the 1970s symposium on valley fever, when they gathered all the scientists together, that it had looked at a lot of the previous studies, and then there are just a smattering of small instances that happened a little bit afterward. It's almost never discussed, but they use the term locus minoris resistentiae because anything with Latin is automatically more important. But it basically means an injury at the a blunt trauma at the sites of an area where there are some coccispores seems to induce a infection localized at that area. There was a case where I believe it was Dr. Papagiannis, one of the more famous valley fever doctors over time, had even testified for workers' comp where a guy injured his knee during work and Cocci had activated there. I have to wonder about this with the site of previous industries if that's the exact same phenomenon happening for you, because that's what it sounds like.
I fell while fighting with a pharmacist in Rite Aid one day to try to get my medication, and I guess his name was Mo Ron. But I fell and I cracked the radial head in my elbow. I've never had a broken bone before that, ever. And now the nerve in my whole arm, the radial head, it healed with no problem. But ever since then, I've had a tremor in my right arm, and the nerve pain down through my arm gets progressively worse every year. And that was 2009 when I fell and broke my arm. And so I know that it's attacking there. I know it is. It's not. I had problems with my trapezius before because I tore it in some athletics, but this is definitely attacking below the shoulder bone.
So are you on fluconazole now?
No, I'm not.
You're not taking anything?
No, I haven't seen an infectious disease doctor since I think I saw the last one who said I was cured. I believe it was August or September 2012. Because I haven't been able to find one that was worth me spending it takes an enormous amount of energy for me to just look like this. So sad. But just, for me to look presentable to go outside. And even if I go to the doctor with just my hair combed down and no makeup, it still takes a lot of energy to prepare to go to a doctor's appointment, to go there. Because I had to cross, Sacramento isn't New York City, but I had to cross from one end of the valley to the other end to go see my doctor. Driving takes an enormous amount of concentration for me now because of the cognitive changes that I've experienced over the years. And then I have to pay a copay. I spend time sitting in his waiting room, sitting in his exam room. He comes in and he says 2 words to me or 2 sentences, and it might be about his kids. I don't know. And then it's okay, make an appointment for 6 months from now. And I figure I'm just wasting my resources because my energy, $15, I'm living on a very small pension and Social Security disability, which totals $1,300 a month, and my rent is $800. So I am doing some magic tricks too. And when I'm too sick to do the magic tricks, then I don't go see the doctors that want to see me every month. Like a endocrinologist for my diabetes wants to see me every month, and my primary care physician wants to see me every month. But they don't want to share information, and they don't want to hear about valley fever. Go talk to your infectious disease about that. Don't talk to us about it. And because to them, and I think that this is pretty widespread throughout the medical community, we are just parts, endocrinologist deals with the hormones and the chemicals, and the primary care just follows up on everything. I don't know what they do, really, because after my last appointment with my primary care physician, as he walked out of the room, he turned to me and he said, "Who is your primary care?" And I said, "You are?"
Well, you know, that's the sad part, and that's what I hope a lot of people get from listening to this is that doctors of all different genres need to work together for the whole person. If each one doesn't want to take you on as an individual entirely, then they have to learn to work together and communicate so that you take care of the entire person, not just a part of the person.
You would think so. You would think that would be going on. And I naively thought that that's what was happening between I've changed primary care doctors. Let's see, I'm on my third one in the last 10 years. And he's also a specialist, an endocrinologist. That's why he asked me about the primary care. He thought I was just there for the diabetes. And as he left the room, then he asked me about that. So I guess he walked out of the room thinking, well, I would have done that differently if I would have known. I hope he thought that. If I would have known I was her primary care. My family says that I'm cursed because anything having to do with me gets screwed up, either in inaccuracies, incompetence from the people I'm dealing with, right down to if I drive through KFC to get fried chicken for the family, I'll get home and it won't be the right thing. So my family won't let me do that anymore.
Well, I don't think you're cursed. I think it's probably the inaccuracies and inefficiencies of people in all fields of endeavor, whether it's Kentucky Fried Chicken or the medical profession or even the gas station. No matter where you go, people do not take pride in being accurate and doing their job. And so I'm taking it off of you. I don't believe it's on you. I think it's on them instead.
No, we can't do that. But, well, it's really kind of a joke, but it is still negative self-talk. My daughter started studying pharmacy technology so she could put herself through pharmacist school, just so that I would never, ever have a problem with the pharmacist again.
Well, that's really nice.
Wow, that's something. And
I think that's pretty severe. I think that's a pretty severe problem with pharmacists, that one of your offspring has to become a pharmacist to put a stop to the problem.
that says a lot. Is there anything else you'd like to say in particular about your own valley fever that you'd like other people to hear and know about?
Well, one of the things that has been the big life changer for me has been the pain. And because for me, I have a pretty high tolerance for pain, as evidenced by when my doctor thought I had gout, he put needles into my knee, under my kneecap without any numbing, and I didn't kill him. So I'm sorry. Whenever I touch on something that's really, really serious, I tend to use humor to deflect the seriousness of it. I know that about myself, and I've had many procedures done to me without any pain medicine, without any numbing or anything like that, and so I know that I'm not a big baby when it comes to pain. But I was on pain medicine. My first primary care physician, who gave me the bad news about about cancer, he had me on OxyContin, Norco-10. He also had me on. There was another one. Oh, and he switched me back and forth to fentanyl patches, which, oh my heck, I couldn't. I felt like I was a junkie laying in a door downtown Sacramento. You know, I just because it's very much like morphine, and that's what he had me on. He had me on a medication called Cadian, and it's spelled Kadian, and it's timed-release morphine. And he had me on the highest dose twice a day, along with the OxyContin and the Norcotins.
Is he still practicing medicine?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the funny thing is that 2 weeks after they gave me the diagnosis of terminal cancer, they cut me off my pain meds, and he wrote me a nasty letter saying, I can no longer have you as a patient in my practice.
Because he had to cut you from the pain meds, or because of?
No, because I had a fit because he didn't titrate me. He cut me off. 3 addictive medications, and each one of them carries with it withdrawals that can get out of hand and be fatal. So how dare he?
Yeah, it sounds like he should have been up for malpractice.
Well, if I would have, I thought about suing him just for the misdiagnosis for 3 years, but as I read anecdotal histories on people like Dale Poldy and the different athletes, they've, the golfer that was misdiagnosed and told he had terminal cancer.
Right, and that's typical, believe it or not.
It is. When I found out it was typical, I thought, I don't have the energy to go make this man's life hell. I need to economize my energy on dealing with this disease. And karma, I'll leave it to karma.
Well, good for you, because you had your head on straight and know what really matters.
If I had a husband at the time, I would have sicked my husband on him. And I probably wouldn't have had to. My husband probably, anybody who would be married to me would go fight that battle. But as far as pain goes, I've had a lot of people in the medical community and outside of the medical community, say in my life, who have had very snobbish attitudes about narcotic pain relievers. And because of that, I lived for 3 years with no pain relievers. And I was working 50 hours a week, and that's when I fell and broke my arm, because I had, out of 180 work hours possible in the month before I broke my arm, I worked 225 out of 180 possible. So I was working too much, and I should have been at home in bed. And so I went for 3 years with no pain medicine. I worked 50, 60 hours a week with no pain medicine. And I didn't even do caffeine. And I was on chemo. I was on fluconazole, 800 milligrams a day, and working like that. So nobody can tell me that I'm a weakling or any of that stuff, because I know who I am. But the snob attitudes that sometimes I see them on Facebook too. I would never take narcotics. Motrin does it for me. It's like, well, Motrin doesn't do it for me. I'm happy for you. But narcotics are the ones that come close to relieving my pain and allow me to have some type of a normal life. I used to have my groceries delivered because I couldn't work and then go to the grocery store after work, something that everybody does. But I couldn't walk by the end of a day's shift. I would come home, go straight to bed. If I got home at 6 o'clock, I would sleep straight through till 6 or 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock the next morning.
Which is very often what happens to people with this disease.
And when I read that in your book, in the epidemic book, I read that in several of the anecdotal histories there, and I thought, okay, that's not just me. I'm not lazy, because I was raised with that. My dad telling all of us kids, you know, you're just lazy. You're just lazy. No, we're just disobedient.
Well, that's why we particularly put the chapter in there about family, the other victims of valley fever, because people sometimes not only lose their jobs and they lose their insurance and they lose their home, but they even lose their families, or they have family members that don't understand. And that's where that's why I'm the one who did that particular one, because people constantly are told, you're no fun anymore. You used to be able to go places and do things, and all you want to do is sit around and do nothing.
Right.
And it's not that the person wants to be like that. And I was hoping by writing that family members would read that chapter and get a better understanding, to have some empathy for the poor family member that's going through this.
Oh, I am so grateful for the books, because just even reading through the anecdotes, the one lady said just getting in and out of her car was painful, and I thought, I hate my car. I'm not alone. So in 2009, another one of my sisters bought me a newer car. And it's not quite as low, because with all the knee problems I've had,
yeah, it'd be hard to get in and out.
it was painful to get in and out. I couldn't get out of my car to put videos in the Blockbuster box. You know, I just, when I first contracted this disease, I lived in a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house that was 2,600 square feet. Just a wonderful home. I didn't own it, but I was renting it from some very dear friends. I was making about $55,000 a year, and in 2003 that was something. It's not near as much now, but in 2003 that was an enormous amount of money. And if I hadn't got sick and I could have stayed with that job, I could be making 70 or 80 now, or even more. But I had to move out of that house because I couldn't work, and I couldn't afford the rent, couldn't afford the utilities. And so I had to move out of that house. So while I had, just before the pneumonia knocked me down in January of 2004, over Thanksgiving of 2003, now I contracted it in October, I moved myself with no help from my sisters or just one guy from church and a couple little kids. I moved myself out of that huge house, put almost everything in storage, and moved into this tiny little 700 square feet apartment. And we just piled everything that wouldn't fit in storage in the living room, and that's the way I lived for the next 5 years. With an unusable apartment, but all I needed to do was lay in bed.
You needed a place to crash.
Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we moved the living room TV into my daughter's room and the other TV into my room. And it was so hard for my daughter. It was so hard because she was not quite 14. And that's such a difficult age anyway. It's worse than the terrible twos. And she, you know, she had always been a very docile child. And she just turned into a rebellious, antagonistic little monster. And she would leave the apartment whenever she wanted to. If it was 1 o'clock in the morning, she'd just walk out. And I would hear
that's what happens when people, a family member or a parent especially, has valley fever. The kids don't know how to deal with it. They don't understand. They don't want to understand. And all they know is they have to run away.
And she did. And I kept telling her if she left the apartment, I was trying to scare her because she was afraid of the police. And I told her, I will have to call the police and tell them that you are a child who is out of parental control, and they will start looking for you, and they will pick you up, and they will either bring you back here or take you to the juvenile hall. And she said, if they bring me back here, I'll just run away again. And I said, well, then if you say that to them, they'll take you to the juvenile hall. Which isn't true. They would probably take her to the receiving home first, which I saw over and over again. They would take my drunk clients at 13 years old to the receiving home rather than to jail or hospital. But so I would be standing in the hallway holding onto the walls and wheezing, You know the feeling, and she would yell, I hope you die.
Oh, gee. That's terrible. That's just so terrible.
Well, she's going to be 24 next week, and we've resolved, we have a really, really fabulous relationship, and a lot of it is due to what we went through together. So,
and here she wants to be a pharmacist to be able to help you.
Yeah.
So things go full circle. But it gives people an idea just how hard this disease can be, not only on the person who it's happening to, but the family that's involved. Everybody's a victim.
Right. Well, and it affects the community too, because I was volunteering at places. I was working for a public agency and doing important work for the community, removing children from drug houses and helping families come back together. And now I can't do any of that. And I believe that the community suffers because of that, because I can't participate in any of that. My family has had to go on without me, just as if I had died, because I can't do any of the things that I once was doing for them. So,
Valley Fever changes lives.
It does. I think if you really look at it from a macro, from the clinical macro, from a wide view, you can see that it affects everybody. Everybody. Even if they don't know anything about valley fever, and even if they don't know that they know someone with it, it affects everyone. Because just like domestic violence does, just like child abuse does, it really, if it affects one person in the community, it affects everyone. I want my fellow survivors to know that it's okay to get their pain treated, and to get it treated until they feel that the quality of their life has been improved by it. Because the worst thing is to sit at home and be in so much pain that you can't live. It's a quality of life issue. I want them all to know that there is hope at the end of the rainbow. Pick their battles, budget their energy, and don't be ashamed of the things they can't do anymore. I went through a serious self-image issue. If I couldn't sing anymore, I couldn't practice social work anymore, I can't work and earn a living, and I'd been the primary breadwinner in my family for 20 years. I couldn't do anything anymore. So who was I? Am I just a valley fever survivor? Am I just someone who's trying to survive valley fever? And so what you said earlier about, we are more than valley fever. And a wonderful supervisor that I had in 2009 when I fell and broke my arm. She has reminded me of that many times. She's messaged me and said, Your language is telling yourself that you are just valley fever. You are not valley fever. You are, quit calling it my valley fever. Disown it. Things like that. So she's always telling me, don't internalize that.
Absolutely. That's why I tell people, never let valley fever define who you are. Because you're a lot more than a disease.
Well, and I feel like all of the things that are coming back to me, the skills that are coming back to me, and my ability to talk. I've written grants. I'm a very good writer. There's a lot I can do for our cause. And I think that maybe that's what all of this is leading up to, is for me to work on behalf of valley fever to bring it out in the open.
Well, we'd love to have you as another advocate here.
I didn't realize until I did a little Google search with my name and valley fever the other day that there was an article in a very small free newspaper, Carmichael Times, that talked about the premiere of the documentary, and then there was a whole paragraph about Sharon Garrett, a resident of Carmichael, is a survivor, was interviewed for this documentary. I wish that more of what I said. I said some really cool things, and he didn't use them. But I'm going to see if he'll email me a digital copy or do whatever he has to do to get me a copy of the interview. I don't even care if it's raw. I don't care if it's raw footage.
Yeah.
But at least you get to say a lot right here and now without editing.
I know. I really enjoy being able to bring something to the table on Valley Fever Survivor, on the Facebook page and on the support group page. And I like it when one or both of you comes on and says, "You're absolutely right, Sharon." And I go, "Yay!"
You earned this experience.
I not only read it, but I learned it, I kept it, and I could give it back. That's a cognitive success for me. So, because I'm always working on my brain, always. I don't want valley fever to take my brain. That's too valuable to me.
Well, there's one or two simple things that everybody should do for the brain every day. And that's, instead of doing things like if you're left-handed or right-handed, use your other hand to do more things, or eat with your other hand. It opens up new pathways in your brain.
Right. I learned that from my aunt, because when she had a major stroke, and strokes run in my family anyway, so she had a major stroke, and she told me everything she learned about. She didn't want to have, the claw hand, and so she would make that hand work, wringing out washcloths or whatever. She would make that hand be the primary strength, and she taught me a lot about coming back from illness and working hard.
Yeah.
And I play a lot of matching games and memory games on my computer, just to keep my brain active. And when it gets too easy for me, I'll take it a level deeper, where it's a little more complicated. And when that becomes easy, then I go a little bit more. But yeah,
It's nice that these kind of things are available.
It really is. And that's another thing that I would recommend to all of my Valley Fever family is work hard against it. You see a baby working so hard to take its first steps. Be like that. Challenge yourself. Challenge the Valley Fever. Learn as much as you can from reading, from searching. Even if you think you already have the answers, look again for answers to your questions. It's just as important as physical exercise to do brain exercise, and don't let anybody send you home unhappy and in pain if they can do anything about it. Don't let that happen. Advocate for yourself. Know enough to be able to be your very best advocate. And I can't be there with every one of them. I want to. I've even offered to drive to Bakersfield or Manteca or whatever to sit and visit with a gal. I can't even remember who it was. To answer her questions about my experience and to tell her what I've learned, because there's so much.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your willingness to do the interview and letting everybody else have an insight into what has happened to you, and they will gain a lot of knowledge, and they will also learn that they have to look and do something more for themselves and take care of themselves better.